This is James O'Keefe. You're watching Infowars.com.
Remember James O'Keefe, founder of Project Veritas?
Were you inspired by some of the videos we did confronting people? Because this is not something that the Washington Post does very often.
I wouldn't say inspired.
Now, he's been busted yet again.
The scumbag that it involves, James O'Keefe.
Attempts to discredit liberal groups and news publications.
Be on the lookout because we got some videos coming out. Good, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be here. I see we have a lot of media in the back. It's been quite a week, and I've got a lot to say. So this should be very fun. I was on the way here in the car, fielding phone calls from the New York Times, the Associated Press, and the Washington Post. Some about a video we just launched. So a lot to say about journalism, a lot to say about media, a lot to say about politics, and I promise you won't be disappointed. So I want to get started. Project Veritas. Veritas is the Latin word for truth. Our organization exists, there's our motto, to investigate and expose waste, fraud, corruption, dishonesty, self-dealing, and other misconduct to achieve a more ethical and transparent society. We live in unbelievable times, and investigative reporting doesn't really happen very often anymore. And sometimes in order to get to the truth, you need to dig deep. And we do at Project Veritas is, yes, we use disguise, yes, we go undercover, but we do so because sometimes it's the only way to ferret out what people really believe when no one's looking. Now, over the course of my career, I started, I'll tell you the story about what happened. I started as one person, and now Project Veritas has many people all over the country, as we speak, infiltrating and exposing. In college, actually, I went to Rutgers University, and I had a great professor. His name was David Knowlton, and he introduced me to Saul Alinsky. And one of the things Saul Alinsky said was that you can make them look to their own principles. And if you do that, you can be very effective. So for our first video at Rutgers University, I was very inspired by political correctness run amok. My First Amendment rights being violated. So I attempted to do a little experiment. And the experiment was to try to ban Lucky Charms at Rutgers University. Myself being an Irish American, I am 6'1". My last name is O'Keefe. But the leprechaun mascot on the cereal box sort of offended me. Well, it didn't really offend me, but that's what I said. And this is the first such hidden camera. This is from 2005. YouTube had not come into being yet. And I went into the dining hall, and there's a point to this story. I went to the dining hall and I said, will you ban Lucky Charms because they're racist against Irish people? And the official was kind of put in a difficult situation because if she bans Lucky Charms, well then she's just a laughingstock. But if she doesn't take my complaint seriously, it kind of puts them in a difficult situation because they have to take my aggrieved complaint seriously.
As a student at Rutgers, he became fed up with political correctness, especially about race. So on St. Patrick's Day 2004, he met with an administrator to demand they stop serving Lucky Charms cereal with its Irish leprechaun.
We're with the Irish Heritage Society. I'm a personal advisor to James, Natalie, and Kean. And basically, they have had some unpleasant, uncomfortable experiences at some of the dining halls.
Okay.
And basically, if you want to...
Well, like Greg said, we're from the Irish Heritage Foundation. It's not recognized by the university, but basically wanted to bring a matter to your concern that we noticed that, you know, you're at the dining halls here at Rutgers serve Lucky Charms.
This official does not know she's being recorded. We're trying to keep a straight face. And we proceed to show her the cereal box.
And we think that this promotes negative stereotypes of Irish Americans, and we don't think it's acceptable in an academic setting, especially one of higher learning. And you know, we brought a box for you to look at here, and there's a what appears to be an Irish American on the front cover, and he's portrayed as a little green cladded gnome, a huckster, and we think that this undermines the importance and severity of St. Patrick's Day, especially during the month of March. So basically what we're trying to do is appeal to...
Can you tell me that again? You feel that he's portrayed as a...
I think he's portrayed as a little green cladded gnome, and this is really, as you can see, we're not all short. I mean, we have our differences of height, and we think this is stereotypical of all Irish Americans, and we're really proud of our ancestry, but because of our history and what has happened to us, we think this undermines and it's offensive.
Rutgers agreed to ban Lucky Charms. So undercover journalism was born. I had no idea it would turn into a national phenomenon, featuring Planned Parenthood, Acorn, NPR, voter fraud, and even Donald Trump talking about us in front of 70 million people at the presidential debates. But I'm going to take you on that journey here for whatever, 45 minutes. And I'm going to talk to you about what we've done and what we've experienced and why we do what we do. And you're not going to hear partisan talking points. You're not going to hear me extolling the virtues of particular public policies. You're simply going to see truth to power. We have a stone lodged between Goliath's eyes. And we are taking on some of the most powerful people on the planet. Our little nonprofit organization, crowdsource funded, going places that no one has gone before. We posed as a donor to Planned Parenthood. We said we were interested in making a donation, but not just any donation, a donation aimed, targeted at African American babies. This is a phone call to Planned Parenthood.
Hello, Autumn. I'm interested in making a donation today.
Fantastic.
What about abortions for the underprivileged minority groups? I want to specify that abortion to help a minority group. Would that be possible?
Absolutely.
Like the black community, for example?
Certainly.
Okay. So the abortion could be, I could give money specifically for a black baby. That'd be the purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to designate that you wanted your gift to be used to help an African American woman in need, then we would certainly make sure that gift was earmarked specifically for that purpose.
Great, because I really face trouble with affirmative action, and I don't want my kids being disadvantaged, against black kids. I just had a baby. I want to put it in his name, so that's definitely possible.
Oh, always, always.
And we just think, the less black kids out there, the better.
Understandable. All right.
Planned Parenthood fired their vice president after this recording. Planned Parenthood was founded by Margaret Sanger. Some of you may like her, some of you may dislike her. Many people don't know that the founder of this organization was a eugenicist. So we were just exposing what someone said. It got a reaction. It certainly got a reaction from the African American community, which was outraged by what the tapes showed.
At a prayer vigil and rally today, these African-American pastors and other pro-life supporters charged Planned Parenthood with, quote, blatant racism, and said the group targets African-American women for abortions. They want Congress to stop their funding.
Planned Parenthood, no more will you receive one dime dipped in the blood of black children.
Today we come to stop what Planned Parenthood is doing.
So pretty powerful stuff, but I got a letter. And this is my first test of truth to power. I got a letter from the Planned Parenthood organization, billion-dollar organization. I have no money. I have no nothing. I'm just a guy on YouTube working with this young woman named Lila Rose. And they threatened me with this provision from the California Penal Code saying that I must cease and desist spreading the videos or I'll go to jail. So what do? If you're a citizen with no resources, no money, no allies, no political friends, taking on powerful people? Well, part of me thought, okay, and this is my first lesson. Do I cow down? Do I apologize? Do I, and I didn't do anything illegal. The areas we've recorded, there was no expectation of privacy in California. We went into these clinics. Some people said, why do you want to investigate good people? That's another thing to say. Why would you go after such good people? First of all, if you're getting taxpayer money, I don't care whether you're good or bad or indifferent or in between, you deserve to be held accountable. That's my point. And we held them accountable. Someone has to. And the letter that I just showed you somehow got to Fox News, and it got onto the O'Reilly family.
Personal story segment tonight. 18-year-old UCLA student Layla Rose, active in pro-life causes, went undercover to a Planned Parenthood facility in Los Angeles. Ms. Rose wanted to show that Planned Parenthood was not following the law regarding minors and abortion.
Exactly, Mr. O'Reilly. Actually, the very first Planned Parenthood that I went into with my friend James O'Keefe, we got those results.
After that recording came out and Fox showed those tapes and Lila went on TV, Planned Parenthood backed down. They withdrew their criminal prosecution against an 18-year-old freshman at UCLA. And I discovered that maybe the solution is not to apologize for being a truth teller. Maybe the solution is not to kneel down before the mainstream media and suck up to them. Because frankly, folks, the journalists, they're not really investigating everyone these days. They seem to investigate citizens these days. Maybe the solution is to do more of this, but do it on a greater scale. So I got a Facebook message from a young woman named Hannah Giles. This is 2009. And she says, you know, James, I like what you've done with the Planned Parenthood tapes. This is an actual screenshot of when I first met Hannah. And she says, have you ever done anything with Acorn Housing? You know, have you ever done anything with Acorn? I say, I've never heard of Acorn. We have some more conversation. She says, well, what if you guys what if someone walked into an Acorn facility and applied for housing and said, you know, that they've got some house of prostitution going on, and I thought to myself, I love it. Now, most people, when they get these unsolicited messages, they just delete them, or that's nuts. I said, would you be willing to play the role of the prostitute? And then I said it might be good to have a pimp, because a prostitute, and I know nothing about pimps and prostitutes, but if you're going to go in undercover and say that you're have house of prostitution, there has to be some pimp. So I scoured my friends and people I went to college with, who's going to play the role of this pimp? Nobody wanted to be the pimp. So I became the pimp. And Hannah definitely was up for it. Hannah was a 20-year-old, I believe, sophomore at Florida International University. I had never met her before. And we just met on Facebook. We joined up together, and the rest is history.
Evidenced by this hidden camera investigation of an unlikely duo looking for tax help.
Scenario: a young woman pretending to be a prostitute and a man pretending to run for Congress one day walk into Acorn's Baltimore headquarters
and are promptly shown the door.
Is it against the law in Maryland? Prostitution?
Anything that the government's not getting money from is always against the law.
Let me get somebody here from taxes so they can talk to you. Tom, she want to know how you can make it legal.
Ruh-roh, Scooby.
Let me make sure there's a code for it, okay?
A code for prostitution?
You might have to name it something else. Performance arts. Let's see. Independent artists. You could be that. Your business is a performing artist. A performing artist? But you are. Okay? So you're not lying. So stop saying prostitute.
Got it.
Now, I honestly was shocked by this. I walked in, you could hear the inflection in my voice, a code for prostitution? I literally did not come up with the outrageous next step of things to say, so I had to improvise on the spot. Andrew Breitbart, who I went to with these videos eventually, would call this the Abu Ghraib of the Great Society. No one had ever even walked into the place. The New York Times had a front page story ready to go on this organization, but spiked it. In other words, in journalism, spike means cancel the story for whatever the reason may be. I don't know. We walked in off the street. This is not exactly, a long-term assignment. I just met these people 10 minutes ago, but it continues.
Or you could refer to yourself as a toll booth operator. Genital contractor. Used vagina salesman. What's remarkable is how unfazed the Acorn people are by this question and situation. This is clearly not the first time they've been hearing this. Oh, oh, you're a prostitute and a pimp, and you'd like to work through the tax implications of said relationship. Hey, Tanya, get me Form 7D. But I'm sure Acorn has a line that they won't cross.
There's going to be 13 El Salvadorian girls coming into this house, and they're very young, and we don't want to put them on the books.
So I was thinking about what can I make, so I came up with this, I sort of tapped and I said, what can I say? She said, well, say you got 13 of them, okay? They came in from El Salvador, and I'm thinking, finally, I'll shock these people. They'll say, we can't give you taxpayer dollars.
Please tell me 13 underage Salvadorian sex slaves is the line.
On the other part of the return, you can use them as a dependent. So you can use them as a dependent because they live in your house.
Are you kidding me?
So you would think that the media, having seen this, right, would be like, wow, this intrepid young people spent their own money. They don't even do this for a living. They've exposed the graft and the immorality and the, I don't know, soullessness of these federally funded programs, right? They'd give me some type of award or something, right? No. This is what CNN had to say after the first video came out.
These conservative filmmakers went around to 3 or 4 offices and basically got thrown out with this ruse. And they found one office where there were 2 people stupid enough to sit down and give them this kind of silly advice. And it sounds to me like that's just entrapment.
First of all, we had more videos that we strategically withheld just so that we could catch people like this making these statements with no evidence, and then we released just the day after he said this. Second of all, you can't entrap someone if you're not an agent of the government, and the definition of entrapment means to get someone to do something they otherwise would not do. Well, if you walk off the street and say, I want to break all these laws, can you help me? And they help you, it's likely they've given this advice before. And we released more than a few videos. In fact, the videos we released, we had 5 or 6 videos, we released them one at a time. But the mainstream media just wasn't very curious about this. They didn't really have a lot to say, except for this here, CNN, talking about how it's an isolated incident.
It has everything you could want, corruption and sleazy action at tax-funded organizations. It's got government ties, but nobody's covering that story. Why?
I don't even know about it. You've got me at a loss. I don't know. But my goodness, if it's got everything, including sleaziness in it, we should talk about it this morning.
This is the American way.
Maybe that's one you just leave to the cables, said ABC News lead aide. But the videos came out one by one. I was dressed like the pimp. People say, well, you edit the videos. Well, I didn't wear the pimp costume into the office. Hannah did wear her prostitute get-up into the office. But I certainly pretended to be a pimp. People say, well, you need to dress like the pimp to be a pimp. And I say, well, pimp protocol doesn't require wearing a pimp fur to be a pimp. You simply say you want to import underage sex slaves and you're a pimp. But these are the types of silly, ridiculous, there might be people in this audience who are thinking this right now, things that people lodge at us. But the story was effective.
Within a few more days, the Senate voted to defund Acorn. A few days after that, congressional investigations have been called for. And as I write this, the IRS has severed ties to the organization.
So after these videos came out, the White House indeed commented on them. And President Obama signed legislation defunding Acorn.
Both the Senate and the House have voted to cut it off.
You know, what I know is that what I saw on that video was certainly inappropriate.
So there's one presidential reaction. Washington Post did a front page story, and their angle was that we were independent. Now, what this reporter, Carol Lenning, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, said was that I went after Acorn due to my motivation that African Americans get registered to vote. I never made that statement on the phone with the Washington Post, and I called her out on it. And you know what? The Washington Post printed a front page retraction. A front page. A Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter. I've never even printed a front page retraction. And it said, the article claimed that O'Keefe went after them, quote, because its voter registration drives bring Latinos and African Americans to the polls. Quote, although Acorn registers people from those groups, the maker, James, did not mention them. What if I didn't call her out? What if I didn't have the balls to call her back up and, and as I'm shaking because I'm 24 years old, I've never even talked to the media before. These people are corrupt. They're corrupt. I mean, and how many things like this happen without anyone finding out about it? So this was a lesson for me. It's all about who's funding me. They were beside themselves. They couldn't figure it out. That two young people would actually spend credit card money and, buy Quiznos sandwiches and drive a jalopy down to Maryland to film this. So, with that animus, I went after NPR. I went undercover in NPR posing as an agent of the Muslim Brotherhood. I said I wanted to make a $5 million check to National Public Radio in order to support the Muslim Brotherhood, and maybe I would see what they would have to say in this meeting.
An undercover upstart has dealt a major blow to the establishment. Public broadcasting has been a lightning rod for years. Supporters call NPR and PBS a public service, worth every penny the taxpayers pay for it. Critics say it's wrong to force all Americans to subsidize what they call a liberal agenda. And they have new ammunition now after an NPR executive was caught on tape in a conservative sting. It has cost the head of NPR her job, and now the federal funding for public broadcasting is under more pressure than ever. Jake Tapper starts us off from Washington. Jake?
Good evening, George. That's right. The CEO of NPR submitted her resignation today. Their chief fundraiser was also shown the door. They're casualties in a war over culture and spending cuts that threatens the very existence of public broadcasting, including Big Bird and Elmo. The rain clouds gathering over Sesame Street today are due in no small part to this man, NPR's now former senior vice president for fundraising, Ron Schiller.
You're looking at a sting operation, a setup by people who know how to do it. NPR Foundation executive Ron Schiller thinks he's meeting with a potential donor, but he's actually being punked.
Last month, Schiller went to the posh Georgetown eatery Cafe Milano, where he thought he was meeting potential donors affiliated with the fundamentalist Muslim Brotherhood, who were offering a $5 million donation. He was caught on tape trying to ingratiate himself to the donors by disparaging Jews, the Tea Party, and Republicans.
O'Keefe and his operatives went to great lengths for this sting, even setting up a fake website for the Muslim Education Action Center. Then the operatives, posing as wealthy Muslim donors, set up a meeting at this D.C. restaurant and set up a hidden camera inside. I spoke with NPR President and CEO Vivian Schiller, who's not related.
So this is the CEO of NPR. She was actually fired after the sting. You wonder why the media hates me. She was fired after the CFO of NPR was fired. Watch what she says here about supporting diversity, and then compare that to what the guy says in the meeting. It's funny, when we went undercover in this investigation, we were at a Georgetown restaurant in D.C., and we had the camera hidden in a bag. And the bag was on the table, and it was aimed in the wrong direction, and we knew it, and we weren't going to get the shot. Well, luckily, the waiter came to serve and bumped the bag into the correct direction. So if the waiter hadn't accidentally bumped the bag camera into the direction, history would have changed. It's amazing how sometimes the confluence of events works in your favor, and sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it did.
The comments made by Ron Schiller are an affront to this organization and are contrary to everything we stand for as a news organization. We stand for diversity of opinion and tolerance and open-mindedness, and his comments did not reflect those values.
Oh, son of a... Liberals got O'Keefe again! Taken in by the Ashton Kutcher of the conservative movement. James O'Keefe, best known for his hidden camera takedowns and for, of course, the least plausible pimp costume ever. Why would a pimp wear ski goggles? Well, how bad could the NPR fundraising executive Ron Schiller have been?
The current Republican Party, particularly the Tea Party, is fanatically involved in people's personal lives and very fundamental Christian, not just the Republic, but I think, I mean, basically they believe that they're white, middle America, gun-toting, it's pretty scary. They're seriously based.
So they were all fired. And the story became a phenomenon. And really, Project Veritas was really born. And we discovered that you have to dig deep. Now, you may think, what is going on with these hidden cameras and these techniques? Isn't there an ethical or a moral issue, a dilemma? And many people in this room are very young. And I'm a millennial. And I've read a lot of books about undercover journalism, and believe it or not, people used to do it. Back in the 60s and 70s and into the early 90s, people used to do this. Let's talk a little bit about what undercover journalism and investigative journalism aims to do. What is the goal? Why would you do it? Why would you pose as something as you're not and use deception as a means to gain access to people? Well, one of my favorite quotes is that the journalist needs to summon righteous indignation, not merely at the tragedy, but also at the moral disorder and breakdowns the tragedy represents. We sort of patrol the boundaries of the moral order, offering the community an opportunity to test and affirm what is not an outrage to that order. And that's what sort of the journalism of outrage, if you will, does. It exposes where that line is, and it gives society a chance to say, well, we don't stand for what that guy believes. But you have to shock the people. Now, we've done 100 investigations. I don't have time to show you them all, but I want to show you two quick clips that talk about what I just said. This is a Houghton Mifflin Common Core investigation we did, and this official, who was terminated, talks about how she really thinks about her job and how she really feels about children that she's supposed to serve.
It's all about the money. What are you, crazy? It's all about the money. You don't think that the educational publishing companies are in it for education, do you? No, they're in it for the money.
Publishing companies are the winners in this game.
Now that might say obvious enough, but a lot of these organizations position themselves as altruistic. They say, we want to help the children. It's all about the children. And in fact, what we found in some of these companies, they were repackaging textbooks to in fact not help the children, but to make more money. Do we as a society want that? Some would say, well, they're just capitalists. Okay, but let me present that information to the public, the people who are supposed to make these public policy decisions, and see if that's okay with them. Here's another one. This one has some foul language, but we're all adults. This official, we posed as someone who may know someone who sexually assaulted a child in a classroom. This is the woman on your right. Her name is Patricia Palaio. She's the president of the Yonkers Federation of Teachers. It's the largest teachers union in Westchester County, New York, where we're based. And she's telling this would-be child molester person that he needs to keep his mouth shut and let nobody know what happened in order to protect his job.
You're just going to smile and suck it up, and you don't talk to anybody. I don't care if it's your best friend. I don't care if the phys ed teacher you went to high school with. You don't fucking tell anybody anything.
All right.
And if I have to hit you in the back of hit him in the back of the head if he does, you don't tell anybody.
Pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. The head, the president. This is not a low-level person. This is not an Acorn employee. This is the president of the largest teachers union in one of the wealthiest counties in the United States, telling a child molester, who she thinks is a child molester, that he needs to keep his mouth shut to protect his job. Do we as a society, do we want that to happen? Of course not. Is that a left or right-wing issue? Of course not. And in this case, nobody attacked Project Veritas. In fact, the local newspaper called for the removal of those union officers. The union officials attacked us. They said the videos were selectively edited. Well, all journalism is edited in a selective fashion. The words on that news page are edited in a selective fashion. It is sophistry to just say something is edited. We stand by our reporting, and we stand by every single edit we have ever made at Project Veritas. But going back to this whole idea of going undercover, it's a tough calculus, but you have to balance what you're exposing, the protection of the truth. I've talked to some of these old undercover guys from the 1960s, and they would say, if you walk in with a microphone and you say, I'd like you to tell me whether you would protect child abusers, you're not going to get the truth. So is it immoral to use deception, or is it immoral to deceive your audience by blindly repeating to your audience what the subject tells you? Because oftentimes people are not honest when you ask them directly. So you have an obligation to tell the truth to your audience, even if it means using deception one-on-one with your target. It's not a sophisticated concept, but you'd think it was. Here's CNN Chris Cuomo, this is another story we did with Al Sharpton and Erica Garner. She's the daughter of Garner, who was a victim of the NYPD. And she's talking about how Al Sharpton took advantage.
James O'Keefe is definitely someone who's identified with the right, but Eric Garner's daughter isn't, and she's the one who said that Al is all about the money.
She was caught on tape not knowing she was being videotaped, so she wouldn't have said that.
Sometimes that's when you're the most honest.
Well, there you go.
There you go. So even my beloved CNN sometimes understands the point here. Chris Cuomo would come back to haunt them because we would end up doing a sting operation on CNN, which I will show you in a minute. But they're making the point, so I put that on our website at Project Veritas, CNN. Sometimes that's when you're the most honest. Also about undercover work, just a few quick points I've learned. This is a famous undercover reporter from Germany. He says, "My job is to deceive in order not to be deceived, to break the rules of the game in order to disclose the secret rules of power. The method I adopted was only slightly illegal compared by the illegal deceptions which I unmasked." Now, we don't break the law at Project Veritas. This guy did. But even he thought he was justified. And do you know who wrote this magazine profile? It wasn't a right-winger. It was Abby Hoffman. There was a generation of folk heroes and troublemakers and muckrakers and pranksters that would use all means necessary to tell the truth to people. Do you know what the point is? It isn't about the techniques. It isn't about the methods. It's about who you investigate. That's the rub. It's about who you go after. That's what makes people question what you're doing in this highly politically charged, almost radioactive climate that we live in. But it's all just a little bit of history repeating. People have done this before. Look at this guy. I mean, he starved himself. There's another one. Someone bought a bar in Chicago in the 1970s. They almost won a Pulitzer for this. They did not. And they just stuck a camera in the bar for 9 months and filmed all the bribes and conversations that were happening from city inspectors. When's the last time you actually saw a newspaper do this? Do you turn on cable news and see any of this happening anymore? So someone's got to do it. So, Project Veritas continues. And this is one of my favorite investigations. I was asked by Yav to show this one. In New Hampshire in 2012, you could actually go into the poll locations and you can get offered ballots in the name of anybody because there's no photo ID. You don't have to show a driver's license to vote. So we went in and we said the names of the dead people to see if they would offer us ballots.
Regardless of what people think of the tactics here, this is certainly an eye-opening investigation. It was conducted by James O'Keefe and his group, Project Veritas. His people took undercover cameras and the names of the dead to polling places in New Hampshire.
Democratic ballot.
State law says you don't need an ID to vote in New Hampshire. And this video appears to show you may not need a pulse either. The self-described watchdog group, Project Veritas, claims it gave the names of dead people at more than a dozen polling places.
Here we are. George F. at St. James Place. Okay, and you're a registered Democrat. That's the registration. Okay, so here's the Democratic ballot.
There's the moment when she hands us the ballot of the person who is dead. I'm not making this up, it's on tape. There were law professors and philosophers who literally said, this video changed our mind. They didn't think voter fraud was possible. To this day, voter fraud never happens. There is a videotape of a polling official handing the ballot of a deceased person to us. And what do you think the governor of New Hampshire said? Well, he said, prosecute James O'Keefe.
Outrageous that we have these out-of-staters coming into New Hampshire, coming into our polling places and misrepresenting themselves to the election officials. And I hope that they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, if in fact they are found guilty. And I hope that they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, if in fact they are found guilty.
Well, that doesn't even make sense because you have to be guilty and then you're prosecuted. But these are some of the things that people say when they're sort of caught, red-handed. So I got a letter from the Attorney General. I keep getting subpoenaed and sued and arrested. If I had more time, I would tell you about all these stories. Most of it was unjust. I didn't do the things they claimed I did. But when you take on power, when you change narratives, I mean, this guy vetoed a law to require a driver's license, and our video changed the people's support of that. We embarrassed him. The job of a journalist is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And we embarrassed this guy so much that his attorney general sent us a letter and sent the letter to others and asked them to cooperate in investigation. I can't make this stuff up. Some of this stuff is like out of a Hollywood screenplay, like the actual things that happen in my life. Because the name of the attorney general of New Hampshire is Richard Head. He goes by Richard W. Head. Maybe that's an attempt to disguise his name. And I actually have a chapter in my book called The Rise of Richard Head. And I actually confronted Richard Head, and he talked to me. And I walked in. I didn't know this, but in the office of the Attorney General of New Hampshire, there's no metal detectors. You just sort of walk in, and Dick Head and I had a conversation. And he said, "I dropped my subpoena, James. I dropped the subpoena. We were trying to see what was going on. But the people of New Hampshire," he says, "James, they came together and they passed a voter ID law because of what you guys did. A voter ID law that overrode the governor's veto of that legislation." You can't make this stuff up. They passed an ID law despite the governor. Lobbyists couldn't have spent hundreds of millions of dollars doing this, but journalism did it. Fast forward to 2016, just to get into the presidential election for a minute, and we go to New Hampshire again, and there's another law on the books that says we need to make you a resident to vote in New Hampshire. Seems common sense enough. We test this, going to the polls before they pass the law, and ask people if we can just vote in New Hampshire not being a resident of New Hampshire.
I was just wondering, if I register to vote, how long do I have to live here for?
I was under the impression it was 30 days, but I'm not sure if they clarified that.
When did you I've just been here for just a little while, like a few days.
It's supposed to be, isn't it in the book? I think it's at least 20 days.
Is it 20 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a question about how long you have to stay.
How long I have to stay here afterwards? Yeah.
You can stay here until the day after the election.
So, like, I could leave tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so what happens? Well, the Attorney General of New Hampshire sends me another letter. This time in 2016, this guy's name, Dick had left the office. This guy's name is Steve Labonte, Attorney General or Assistant Attorney General of New Hampshire, and he says, "You must cooperate with our investigation." Now, they would never dream of sending the New York Times or NBC News or any of those people back in the room subpoenas, probably. And those people in the back of the room with the cameras would tell them to go to hell. Because the one thing a journalist doesn't do is give up their sources. They don't give up their sources, and they don't give their hard drives to the U.S. government just because they want us to cooperate. So Project Veritas doubles down. We go back out in the field and catch Bernie Sanders, field director, talking about the fact that he doesn't live in New Hampshire, but he votes in New Hampshire because he's registered to vote illegally at the campaign headquarters.
Did you have to vote in Colorado then?
No, I voted here.
Oh, you did? How?
So to vote in New Hampshire, all you have to do is prove domicile. That's about it.
Oh, so you registered in Manchester.
Yeah.
How did you do that, though? What address did you use?
This one. Yeah.
Oh, really? The office?
So he's just illegally admitting to registered to vote. It's that little moment right there. That's a crime. It's a Class A misdemeanor. The guy was even stupid enough to post a picture to Twitter of him doing it. Registering to vote at his campaign headquarters is a class misdemeanor. And there he is, all his information, publicly available information, and he was never charged. Not only did he not charged, guess what the Attorney General of New Hampshire did? They sent me another letter. James, we need you to cooperate. As with the first video, we are requesting that you cooperate with our investigation. Why would you cooperate? Would you ask 60 Minutes to cooperate with the U.S. government to hand over hard drives? Never. You know what? I'm not a journalist, according to them. And whether or not you cooperate or not depends upon who's a journalist and who is not a journalist. Now, at Veritas, we believe that we are all journalists now. Kind of like we're all socialists now, right? We're all journalists now. Journalism is properly understood to be an activity, not merely an identity. In other words, if one of you happened to, with your phone, I don't know, accidentally capture a bribe taking place, congratulations, you've just conducted an act of journalism. But the establishment desperately needs to narrow the definition of who is a journalist in order to protect their power. That's the fact. That's the truth. And right now, they are very worried. So, this manifests in me getting letters from the U.S. government asking me to cooperate by handing over my sources. It's highly unjust, and it's something that we have to deal with. But what do we do when we get all these letters? I think you know the moral of the story. We keep releasing more videos. And we released a video, this is from an Australian, actually, in New Hampshire, talking about working with Bernie Sanders, which is illegal and not allowed under federal election law. And it makes all this media in Australia, you know, ALP, which is the Labour Party from Australia, working with the Bernie Sanders campaign, makes international media. It doesn't make one American cable news show. It made international headlines, our investigation. Didn't make U.S. media. And the Attorney General sent out a letter. So then I'm like, okay, you want my hard drive? I'm going to give you my hard drive. I go to Concord, New Hampshire, and I hold a press conference, and I hold up the hard drive of all the raw tape, and I say, Governor of New Hampshire, the Attorney General works for you. You're the political person running for Senate. Why don't I give you the footage, and you can give it to your Attorney General? And as I'm walking, you know, to the governor's office, this man walks up to me, and he hands me a subpoena, a criminal grand jury subpoena. And at first I thought he was a fan, because he's wearing a green vest. He's like, hey, Mr. O'Keefe. I'm like, oh, hi, how you doing? He's like, here's a subpoena. And the guy's name, I can't make this up, is Investigator Dick Tracy. So I actually laughed. I was getting a criminal grand jury subpoena, and I actually laughed. That first there's Dick Head, now there's Dick Tracy. I mean, I've got a lot of dicks in my life. Let me tell you, there's actually a New Hampshire, I think, state rep called Richard Sweat. So there's a lot of that going on. But I got the criminal grand jury subpoena, and you know what? They dropped it. They dropped it because of the pressure. And that's what it's about. So I want to show just one or two more things before I get to the Q&A. What do we believe at Project Veritas? Because I know that's what some of you are asking or thinking. We believe that our country is stuck in a place where solutions are beyond the reach of the electoral, judicial, and executive branch. We believe that the media is everything. The media elects our candidates. The media is the most powerful force, often for evil. And due to economic, legal, political reasons, which are well beyond the scope of this talk, that we cannot rely upon our government anymore, or our corporate media. And we have to do something about it. So, Veritas' goal is to shock people by exposing things like what I've shown you thus far. Everything I've showed you thus far has led to legislation, resignations, and massive impact. And by any definition, Katie Couric won a journalism award for asking Sarah Palin a very simple question. And Michael Hastings won a journalism award for getting Stanley McChrystal to resign. Some of these people I respect, some of them I don't. But by any definition, my results-oriented journalism is shocking people by showing people what's really going on. That leads us to the mainstream media and some of the work we've done directly investigating them. This took us 6 months to do, undercover inside CNN in Atlanta. This is the senior producer in Atlanta telling us that the Russia story is, quote, bullshit.
Then why is CNN constantly like, Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Because it's ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now.
But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit?
Could be bullshit. I mean, it's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof.
Oh, that's just damning. I mean, the network is, look, every day, every hour, every minute, they even have a little chyron, the Russia with bubbly font, and their own producer. People would say, yes, but he's just a medical producer. Yes, but he's in meetings with the CEO of the network, and that's what he said.
I just feel like they don't really have it, but they want to keep digging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the president is probably right to say, like, look, you are witch hunting me. Like, you have no smoking gun. We have no real proof.
Now, the thing about this investigation, this took 6 months to do. It was very sophisticated, very complex, and we had to do a lot of undercover techniques by posing as many different characters. And do you know what? I've never revealed what I did to get this information, and I won't. I won't. So when people ask me here tonight, well, what did you, who was the name of your people? What did you do? I'm not going to answer your questions. I'm going to say, I can't reveal my sources and methods. This information was not given to us by walking into CNN. This information was given to us because we built relationships over a long period of time, posing as things we were not, building trust with people, winning friends and influencing people to get them to trust us. That's what undercover work is. If you don't like it, then don't like undercover work. But that's what we do at Project Veritas, and it's effective. It was so effective, CNN responded. They didn't say the video was fake. They said that they, quote, stand by our medical producer, diversity of personal opinion is what makes CNN strong. So basically they're saying this guy is just a medical producer, so what does Project Veritas do? We go after the political people. Van Jones says the Russia story is a, quote, nothing burger.
Hey, man. We met in Palm Springs a few years back.
Good to see you, man. You good?
Yeah. How you been? What are you doing?
Good.
What do you think's going to happen this week? I mean, with the whole Russia thing.
The Russia thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
You know, one of the most amazing things is that this whole meme warfare, there were like thousands and thousands of memes after this Russia story. Van Jones saying that it's all just fake. Nothing burger like entered the public lexicon. Not my words, not me characterizing. This is what he said, not me. So people are making these memes. What if I told you the Russian thing is just a big nothing burger? That one's from The Matrix. And this is him on CNN. And watch this interview. I love this interview because he goes on CNN, and sometimes, believe it or not, people in the mainstream media are, they actually take us quite seriously. And even though the Chirons, the producer in New York wrote this Chiron, he's expecting him to throw me under the bus. But watch what happens when he goes, O'Keefe's a liar, a convict, and a total scumbag. Watch what happens.
This guy is a hoaxer. He's a fraudster. He's been convicted. He's paid fines. They have to apologize. He's a scumbag. And he does this stuff all the time.
So when on the tape you say that the Russia investigation was a big nothing burger, what do you mean?
I meant for progressives to keep jumping up and down about this doesn't make a lot of sense. The worst thing is the Trump White House then elevated it.
There's a video circulating now, whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but I would encourage everybody in this room and frankly everybody across the country to take a look at it.
So you got the Trump White House elevating a guy who's a known fraudster.
Right, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, she didn't know if it's true or not, but she urges everyone to look at it.
That's not good.
And let's go back to our friend Anderson Cooper. This is probably one of the most amazing moments of Project Veritas history. We're in our office and we're watching CNN and Fox and MSM forced down to cover these videos.
The undercover videos produced by discredited conservative activist James O'Keefe suggest it was Democratic operatives, hired political activists, working in coordination with the DNC to instigate violence and incite reactions at Trump rallies.
And I think it's her campaign, because what I saw, what they did, which is a criminal act, by the way, where they're telling people to go out and start fistfights and start violence. And I'll tell you what, in particular in Chicago, people were hurt and people could have been killed in that riot. And that was now all on tape, started by her.
And in the background, because the thing had become a Twitter phenomenon, and it was like tens of millions of tweets. I mean, it was this phenomenon. And of course, it was not trending on Twitter. Power Rangers was trending on Twitter with like 3,000 mentions. We didn't have any mentions because that's another investigation for another day. And in the background, you saw the citizenry putting up signs that said Project Veritas. And he doesn't seem very happy, but he has to say that.
Video emerging of a group of pro-Clinton political operatives talking about stirring up trouble and provoking violence at Trump rallies. The video comes from Project Veritas brainchild. James O'Keefe, who's got a less than stellar reputation for accuracy. However, some of the things you'll hear on the tape are certainly hard to ignore.
I mean, it was just amazing because this organization has grown and it has blown up, and people around the country are saying, you know, fake news media, Project Veritas is where it's at. And, you know, this investigation was enormously successful. It made the front page of the New York Times. They actually did a screen grab from the video. But this is the climax. I'm at the debate, and I can't get our stuff on Fox News. A lot of these networks are not going to play hidden camera recordings, you know, because it's hidden camera recordings. They're going to wait until the video comes out, and then they're going to report on the reaction to the video. So I'm thinking, well, I see Hannity over there, and Hannity's a nice guy. I've been on his radio show. Maybe if I get close to him interviewing Donald Trump Jr., like stand, I don't know, next to the wall or something, and I sort of walk towards the interview, maybe I'll get a chance to get onto the camera and talk about the investigation, right? I know it's a crazy idea, but I'm trying to get people to see these videos. So I give it my best shot.
Let me ask you this, because I think this is important. We had 2 tapes now come out. I just saw James O'Keefe in the crowd here a moment ago. We had 2 tapes come out. One shows that money coming directly from the Clinton campaign, funneled through the DNC, funneled through democracy, whatever, right into the hands of agitators fomenting violence going back as far as Chicago against your father, and a huge, massive voter fraud scheme that they put into works. This, to me, hasn't even resonated.
So there I am in the background, and I'm on my phone, and I'm thinking I'm going to walk back. Maybe I can get into this, you know, and talk about these videos, because now he's actually talking about the videos, you know.
With the American people.
No, it has, and it has to get out there. I mean, and that's part of what he was talking about today, okay? We'll accept a fair result, but we're not going to accept something when they say, we've been doing this for 50 years, we've been busting, we don't play by the rules. The rules only apply to conservatives, apparently, or maybe we're the only ones with the morals to be able to actually comply by them. You know, this stuff's coming out. This isn't pretend. This is undercover video.
That's James O'Keefe right over there that did the video.
He did a great job, and I think, listen, he's doing the American people a great service by highlighting this, because everyone thinks...
That's one way to get on television. So, and we did it. You know, we did it. And, you know, I honestly believe that, you know, I don't know who said it, maybe Mark Twain said it, but truth is honestly stranger than fiction. And sometimes to get to the truth, you have to dig deep. Sometimes you have to take on people in power. You have to use deception in order not to be deceived. In order to shock the people, you have to be truthful to the people. Because we never deceive our audience, and that's the key distinction. We never deceive the masses. We use deception as a means to gain access to tell the truth to the masses. Because that's what we need in this country, and that's what Project Veritas is all about. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take some questions.
Hey, thank you for coming today. I just wanted to ask, given that you found through your investigatory journalism that Washington Post was doing their due diligence investigating potential accusers, are you more inclined to believe Moore's other accusers, or do you think, does your opinion remain the same?
I don't have an opinion on it, honestly. I can't speak intelligently about that. I can only speak intelligently about what we exposed. You know, the Washington Post seems to want a Nobel Prize for vetting a source correctly. I think the mission of Project Veritas is to hold people, keep them honest, hold them accountable. And I think we do that. I think we keep people honest. I think our work is sort of changing human nature and making people a little cautious, making sure people are reporting things accurately. We did a story released this morning. I didn't have a chance to show you because we ran out of time, but video showing a Washington Post national political correspondent saying that the Russia stuff, he said, is a effing black box, probably not a story there, no story yet, which contradicts everything that you hear from the paper's op-ed section. People say, well, there's a difference between the news section and the op-ed section. There is, but if their own subject matter expert and beat reporter says there's no story there, why do we hear all this conjecture about Russia? So that's the story that we released, and we just did it this morning. So
thank you.
Hi, Mr. O'Keefe. My name is David Brockler, and I work as a cybersecurity consultant. And in cybersecurity consulting, companies will often hire us to do a lot of undercover work. And they'll have us go and expose a lot of the vulnerabilities and the secrets in their companies that the higher-ups don't know about, or maybe they do. but they hire us to actually fix a lot of those problems for them. However, it's clear to me that the news media doesn't want to change the problems in their systems. So what do you think has to happen to cause that landslide change that'll fix the media as a whole and will cause them, to start doing investigative journalism or start actually reporting the truth to the American citizens?
I think what we're doing. I think just doing more of what we're already doing. I mean, at Veritas, we have, I can't say how many, but we have many people across the country, as I speak, having meetings undercover with people at varying levels of access. And I think we have to keep people honest. People are afraid. Like, we're out there, and that's their problem. They're going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to deal with me for many years, holding them accountable, filming them covertly, making sure that they're doing up to no good. And sometimes their undercover investigations pan out. Sometimes, W.C. Fields said you can't con an innocent man. You can't expose something that isn't there. I don't have the luxury of most journalists are opinion makers and pundits, and they just say whatever they want. I don't have that luxury. I can only report what the person says. So undercover journalism can't have a 100% success rate because oftentimes the person you're investigating isn't corrupt. Or maybe we're making them more honest because they're afraid of us. So I think it's just doing more of what we're doing. I mean, someone's got to do it. Someone's got to, and honestly, most people are too afraid. Because when I get those subpoenas from the Office of the Attorney General, or when I get arrested and falsely accused, and all those people resign in disgrace, by the way, I wrote a book about that. People go, well, if they do this to O'Keefe, I'm not going to do it. The thing that people fear most, I've discovered, and certainly this is true, but the Republican Party, I'm not a Republican, is that the Republican Party fears the media so much. They fear being called names. They fear the humiliating power of the press, to quote Dinesh D'Souza. And let me tell you, it is tough. You get attacked viciously. Most of it untrue. I showed you the slide earlier from the Washington Post's Carol Lenning, who printed a front page retraction about me. And it hurt when she said that I was motivated by racial reason. It wasn't true, and she admitted it wasn't true. But most people are afraid of that, so you have to keep going, you have to scale, you have to grow in order to create an institution that will allow you to keep doing it.
Thank you for coming. I enjoyed your presentation. I'm kind of going to echo what you said here. So after you sent this actress into the Washington Post and she was kind of outed as a phony, are you more inclined to view the Washington Post's investigative work on the War scandal as credible journalism, since they kind of outed this actress that you sent in, or do you still believe that it is not credible journalism in regards to that specific story?
Well, I'm not going to speak to the motive. I think it's easy and lazy to ascribe motive to what we do or what we try to do, but I can't speak to investigations that are imagined or don't come to fruition. I can only speak to what I release. I can't release my sources and methods. As I said many times tonight, I can't talk about the names of the people I work with, or even comment on an ongoing thing. And I don't have a comment on that politician because I haven't investigated that politician. I can only speak intelligently to the content. The content speaks for itself. The story speaks for itself. So I can't comment on it. I can't speak about the names of people. People want to say, well, does this person work for you? Does that work? I can't comment on that. So I can't comment on my knowledge about any victims or anybody because I haven't released a story about that.
So you don't find it more credible?
No, not yes or not no. There's no comment from me about that.
Hi. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, W.C. Fields said you can't cheat an honest man.
Right.
That's not exactly the same thing you said. But anyway, my question is, do you have a position on net neutrality, and so what?
I don't think I have a fully fleshed out position to articulate here tonight about that. But, you have another question?
Thanks for coming, Mr. O'Keefe. I just wanted to ask you a question. You caught the Washington Post red-handed, and they're trying to castigate you as an evil person, but can you just speak to the hypocrisy of the Washington Post about how you caught them red-handed?
Well, I mean, we released 2 videos so far. yesterday was a guy named Dan Lamothe who basically said into a hidden camera, I can't believe I worked with these people. I think he was referring to the op-ed pages, and they're so not grounded in what we do. And today we released another video, a national security correspondent for the Washington Post, saying something slightly different. He said, listen, I'm a beat reporter for the Washington Post, I do the Russia stuff, and there just maybe isn't a story there. It's an effing, he says, an effing black box. He just doesn't think that there's there. And I think the point I was making, and I was tweeting all day, I had like 1,000 people with blue check marks attacking me all day. This doesn't matter, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter. And I was saying, well, my point in the story, releasing these videos into the Washington Post today and yesterday was, if he's the subject matter expert on the Russia beat, and he's saying the facts say that there really isn't too much of a collusion here between Trump and Russia, but all the opinion makers who aren't the subject matter experts keep on parroting the narrative that there is, and that's a little bit corrupt and misleading for our opinion leaders if they're not basing it in fact. That's the hypocrisy. And when I was tweeting back, and Marco and I were tweeting all day, we had 2,000 tweets back at these journalists, they didn't have anything to say to that. A couple of them actually said, O'Keefe has a point. We actually had a couple people say, you know what, it is kind of despicable somehow, these op-ed pages, and by the way, most of journalism on television is opinion these days. When you turn on cable news, you see mostly opinion. So if they're not basing those opinion on facts, if I just came up here and said, well, people say, well, you're an opinion maker, you can have an opinion. Well, if my opinion was smoking is good for you, I think that would be a corrupt opinion. It's not based in fact. And if I have a paper with a bunch of reporters who are saying smoking is awful for you, and my opinion page says smoking is great, best thing ever, my point in the investigation was to showcase how there's a divergence there, and it's sort of propaganda. And if those aren't my words, those are the words coming from the people in private. Why don't they say this publicly? And I think that's a service. I think showing our corporate media and what they say and do and misleading the people I think that's important. I think that's a vital public interest that justifies the undercover techniques to obtain the information.
Shake your hand.
What's that?
Can I shake your hand?
Maybe afterwards.
Hey James, my name is Justin Gall. I'm a reporter with the Daily Beast. The first thing I want to ask you about, you said earlier that Project Veritas doesn't break the law. In 2010, you pled guilty to a misdemeanor for entering a federal building. Is that not breaking the law?
I stood falsely accused. There is such a thing as being falsely accused, and I think that people, particularly on the left, don't forget what that means in this country. I could talk for an hour about that incident. I'll talk for a couple minutes.
Technically breaking the law, if you pled guilty to it.
Yes, and I didn't break the law, and I didn't actually commit a false the Class B misdemeanor was entry by false pretense. When I walked into the federal building, this is what actually happened. I went into a federal building. I took out my wallet. Anyone, you can go. You're a Daily Beast reporter. You can walk into a federal. It's not a crime for a reporter.
Before you go on here, because I know you're probably going to cut me off, I just have to ask you, for actual victims of sexual assault, who might be offended by the
can I answer your first question, or?
No, because I don't really think that you're actually going to answer.
I am going to answer.
So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to ask you for actual victims of sexual assault who might be offended that one of your operatives posed as a fake victim of sexual assault. What do you have to say to those men and women?
Well, I'm going to finish answering your first question, and if you don't want me to answer it, then I'll just move on to the next person. You said that I broke the law, so let me properly address what happened. I walked into a federal building, showed my real driver's license when I entered the federal building, and I went up to the senator's office. So there wasn't a false pretense because I showed my real driver's license. And I said to the secretary, I'm waiting for somebody. That's what I said. I sat on the couch and said I was waiting for somebody, and then they said, okay. And that eventually the feds would prosecute me for walking in and trying to interfere with government equipment. And I was cleared of that charge, and eventually it was just false pretense. The prosecutors, all who prosecuted me, all resigned in disgrace. One of them anonymously blogged about me on the internet. I bet you didn't know that. The other thing you probably don't know is that the federal government destroyed my cameras, destroyed my tapes, so that they could charge me with something I didn't do. I wrote a whole book about it. It's called Breakthrough. I urge you to pick it up and read it. It is one of the most unbelievable abuses of power that you will ever read. And it taught me about what we are up against. There is such a thing as being falsely accused. I was incarcerated. I was put on probation for something I did not do. And if you were shackled by your legs, by your hands, and put in an orange prison jumpsuit into a cage, you may too sign away your Miranda rights and sign that document out of shock about what was happening to you. The prosecutors who put me in the cage said, "Oh, you're the boy who did the acorn thing." And I said, "Yeah," thinking it would help me. And then they said, "Oh, well, we're going to have to keep you overnight." Okay? So sometimes when you take on powerful people, people retaliate against you. I've lived it. Trust me, I lived it. 3 years, federal probation. And if you look at history, people go through this. People get attacked. And I don't understand. The one thing I don't understand is I'm on your side, okay? We are both journalists. You probably don't think I'm one. I think you're one. We fight for justice. We fight powerful people. That's what we do, all right? And I was dead broke, I was incarcerated, and I was charged with something I didn't do. And it broke my heart. And I'm here to tell people and to inspire people that they can do it too. So I just want you to know the truth. I don't know if you want the truth, I don't know if you can handle the truth, but that's actually what happened in that incident. And I thank God it happened, because it was kind of like getting a vaccine, you know, and I was going to get a greater disease. It taught me a lesson. I didn't commit a crime in Louisiana, but I learned a valuable lesson. Okay? Thank you.
How about my second question?
I'd like to move on.
So you said you were going to, I gave you a chance to answer the first question, which you asked for time to do. I gave that to you. You said you would answer the second question. Now answer it. What about real victims of sexual assault who are offended by the fact that you had your operative pose as a fake victim?
I have no comment on that. I'd like to move on to the next question, please.
I'm just not going to reveal. I'm not going to reveal my techniques, my methods, and my sources no more than any mainstream media reporter would reveal those things.
So in your opinion, would planting a fake sex assault victim be going too far, be going past the line of ethics?
You can ascribe motive to me if you wish, and you could ask that question, but I'm not going to address it. I'm not going to answer that question. I think you have to evaluate the public interest of what you expose. You have to evaluate the thing that you are exposing. I think at the talk tonight I talked about, it's not about techniques. It never is. It's about who you go after. And unfortunately, it's become about taking sides in our culture and our politics. It's become about what organization or entity you investigate and whether it's justified. And I don't want to talk specifically about something that we haven't released specifically.
So how do you choose to make a fake news sting that
we have an internal committee, a creative committee at Project Veritas. We're truly independent. No one controls what we do. No one really has fiduciary control over what we do. And we have a process internally. And we choose issues that we think are of vital public interest.
Hi James, I'm a freelancer and I'm a victim of sexual assault. I just wanted to ask, as a victim, did you ever consider going in what putting a sexual assault victim forward, a false sexual assault victim forward, would do if a story did come out to sexual assault culture in this country, making false of potentially all sexual assault victims' accounts throughout time, or were we just a means to an end for this story? And if truly your mission was up there the whole time, and it's about equality and creating tolerance and this, and what do you think would happen if this story came out?
You can assign motive to what we do if you wish, but undercover work in general is about using various techniques to get people to open up to you. And I don't usually release or reveal or broadcast the techniques that I use. So you're welcome to read into or assign or make up imaginary motives if you wish. But undercover journalism...
We're not asking about the motive. We're asking about the use of someone to pose as a fake sexual assault victim. What does that do to actual survivors of sexual assault? What message does that send?
I'm not going to speak.
It was your operative that posed as that. We know that.
I'm not going to confirm or deny any undercover operations that are real or imagined in any...
Let's talk hypothetically then. What does that hypothetically do to actual victims of sexual assault?
I'm not going to speak to real or imagined investigations. I'm not going to speak to motives or techniques. I'm not
So
gonna
that wasn't
say-
your investigation then?
I'm not going to
It's
speak
an imagined
to,
investigation?
I'm not going to speak to our sources or our methods, and you're welcome to assign a motive to me.
I'm not
if you
asking
wish.
about motive. We're asking what does this do
I
to
am-
actual victims of sexual assault
I
who
am-
now have to deal with somebody pretending to have that perpetrated on them to
I'm not
discredit
gonna-
a news
I'm
organization.
not going
Do
to
you know the
answer.
statistics about false reports of sexual assault versus
I'm not
real
going
reports?
I'm not going to address that.
Do you think that sexual assault culture exists in this country?
I
And
don't-
victim blaming and shaming exists in this country?
I don't think it's my place as an undercover journalist to go into that. I use various techniques.
Would it
to
become
get-
your place if
I
you're?
spent, we spent
you would spurn
7
that
months,
culture?
we spent 7 months undercover inside CNN to grab a story that was of vital public interest. And I'm not going to disclose to you the techniques we use to get the information. We use all types of very sophisticated, very elaborate ways to gain information into our targets. And I will not and I cannot disclose those techniques to you. And I'm not going to speak about imaginary motives or any bizarre alleged motives that probably aren't true. I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to debate you about it. I'm just going to talk about what we actually release. And the last 2 days, we've released 2 undercover investigations into the Washington Post that have started a conversation. And we're going to release more. And we're not going to stop. And nothing that the media says about me will ever get me to stop. The only way to stop me is to kill me. Understand?
Well, James, I hope that I can open a conversation with you
I'd like to have a
about the means to an end with
The
sexual assault
conversation's
victims.
over. It's about the target.
These Washington Post
And
report, the
everybody
videos that
that
you
gets
have
pulled aside with it.
released,
Is that no-
However, he has
what
to
exactly
experience,
has it
he'll do
showed? What do you plan to release? Because at this point, a lot of those videos have showed reporters talking about their work. and
Yeah,
their
absolutely.
due
So the
diligence.
one this morning, as I talked about, the one this morning was talking about how the Russia-Trump collusion, in his words, he said was an effing black box. He sort of implied there wasn't maybe a story there. And that contradicts every opinion and conjecture and narrative that we're fed. And a lot of people have pointed out today that maybe these opinions aren't based in fact. I mean, that's a legitimate argument. And I think people need to see what these media people are really saying. So then we did one on the New York Times, which changed the New York Times social media policy. We did one on CNN, which blew up CNN in the media and exposed what these people really believe and why they're doing the journalism they're doing. And now we're doing one on the Washington Post, and on we go. And actually, we have people all over the United States right now using various techniques to gain access to people. I'm not going to disclose what they're doing, but I can tell you one thing. Project Veritas is definitely keeping them honest. And I don't think they should be patting themselves on the back because they actually vet a source. They shouldn't be getting a Nobel Prize for vetting a source. This is what they should be doing. But Veritas is definitely keeping them honest, and nothing's going to stop us. Okay?
You said sort of implied. Is that enough proof? The Washington Post report, you said sort of implied.
I can't
sort of
remember the
situation.
exact quote, but the quote was, you know, it may not be a story. He said it's an effing
You did
black
all
box.
that just
It's
to prove they did their job, dude. Come on, man. Just admit when you're wrong.
so,
It
you
ain't
know,
that hard.
he said what he said, and it contradicts what the paper says. And my question is,
You
why
didn't
don't?
answer the question. You sat there and talked about
I'm
motives
trying to-
over and over and over
So-
again when we asked what happens
So,
to actual
trying to
victims of
answer the
sexual
question.
assault
So-
because of your operative.
I'm a victim of sexual assault.
So what he said in private, the question is, why didn't he say it publicly? Why does it contradict the rest of the paper what they say? That's all. That's the point. And you know, let the content speak for itself. Veritas believes in the power of free people. If they're just given information, if they're given the truth, they'll make the right decisions. And we're not giving them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Keefe, can I get a photo with you?
We are here with James O'Keefe, the man behind Project Veritas Action, who has come out with some pretty amazing investigative reports. Just recently, the Washington Post report that was jaw-dropping. Now, James O'Keefe, I noticed you mentioned during your presentation that you were running out of time. You wish you had more.
Yeah.
Was there anything specific that you wanted to get to that you didn't have a chance to?
I just wanted to show the audience here at SMU Southern Methodist University about our New York Times sting, about more media stings, the Washington Post sting. I spoke a long time about undercover ethics and the techniques used to get the information, to clarify a lot of things there. But I was expecting to be protested, but I think the presentation went well, and people really, their eyes kind of opened, because it was about truth to power, and it was about all these media conglomerates and all the forces that work against the people. And I think hearing the stories about going against, investigating the government and them trying to shut us down and failing, I think it inspired a lot of people, honestly, that didn't think they were going to be inspired.
Definitely. And, what advice would you give to young people out there who want to be journalists, trying to get into the journalist industry, given that we have this fake news mainstream media avenue, and then we also have this citizen journalism YouTube avenue? What would you give them advice to do?
I think grab a camera, go out in the field, and start your own YouTube channel, and just start doing it, and try to learn lessons from people who've done it before, whether it's your heroes in independent media, or whether you want to pick up some books from the old school and read Upton Sinclair and Nellie Bly and and those types of muckrakers, or even some of the modern citizen bloggers that are out there. Learn from them and go out and make mistakes. But the main message, one of the main messages that I had tonight at SMU, was the idea of being unafraid. You have to be willing to face the sort of public humiliation that comes along from very powerful people doing this, and that's the hardest thing for people to get over.
Well, do you have any hints for us as to what's next? Who's next?
I would love to tell you. We're American Pravda. I'm coming out with Veritas is coming out with a book launch in January, and I think we're rolling out this Washington Post thing right now, and we're taking a lot of heat for it. But we have a video just came out this morning, and guys on tape saying the Russia stuff is an effing black box. It maybe not be a story. Contradicts everything the paper tells us in the op-ed pages and elsewhere. And I think we're going to be going after bigger and bigger entities. And I have the words on my lips, and I want to say the names of these companies. But just imagine the largest and most powerful informational entities in the world. And that's who we're going to go after. And sometimes we're going to stumble, and sometimes, the undercover exposés don't. Sometimes there isn't a story, but there's always a story somewhere, and it's our job to find it. And we know that, for example, a lot of people within various media entities are doing bad things, and our job is to ferret them out, make them accountable, make them honest, keep them honest.
Definitely. Well, I look forward to that. That sounds pretty amazing and interesting. Well, another question is, I had the opportunity to talk to some of the people that were leaving, and some people mentioned they were wondering why Project Veritas edits their videos. Could you kind of explain that a little bit? And also, would you be willing to release full copies of videos to kind of silence some critics?
I don't think that would silence my critics. I don't think my critics are ever going to be silent. My critics are insatiable. We are an existential threat to, I hate to use the word establishment because it's a cliche, but we're an existential threat to very powerful people. And if I release the full video, I've done this, by the way, where when I walk in, I walk out. I did a video on Pat Moran, Congressman's son in Virginia, and they said, well, how do I know you didn't turn the camera back and go back in? It was an illogical, silly, irrational reaction, so it's impossible to satiate them. What I just told the Associated Press reporter who I talked to a minute ago was, hold us to the same standard you hold yourself to, and tell me a specific edit to these critics. Tell me a specific edit that I have actually done that represents the work meaningless, because people keep resigning. There's scandals and resignations and legislation. So show me the edit that makes the video fake or unreal. And media edits everything. They don't release their raw notebooks. I just gave an interview with the New York Times, and they didn't publish my comment. So they selectively edited out my comment. And if that's okay for them to do, I think maybe we need to revisit this whole concept of information and what it means, and maybe reporters ought to release their full raw notebooks, but don't don't expect me to do something that they don't do as investigators, is the point that I was making today.
That's right. I mean, we've seen them edit up what Trump says, and then you have that misunderstanding. But what do you think the next shoe to drop from the mainstream media is? We've seen this, the Russia collusion narrative, and that seems to be kind of drying up. Do you think that they're going to try something else?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, I can only talk about what I've seen firsthand, and with the CNN, it was all about ratings, and and clicks, and the so-called Trump bump the New York Times talked about. But I honestly believe, and call me crazy, but I actually think that we've managed to keep them a little honest here. And they're afraid. The managing editor of the Washington Post sent out a blast email. We got a copy of it. It said, beware, be on the lookout for people posing as students. And so I think a lot of these journalists we better vet the hell out of our sources. We better vet the hell out of what we're doing. And if we contributed to that, I think that's a service, that's a public service. What are they going to do next? I think the media is broken, and I think it's been broken for a while for economic reasons, mostly economic reasons. And that's not a left or right thing. It's just economics. There's very little investigative journalism these days that happen. It's narrative driven. It's agenda driven. So I think that there's going to be a tipping point in the near future where people like you, citizens, you know, have more power and more ability to make more of a difference. And I hope that we can reach that point sooner rather than later. It's just that the problem is we disseminate our information on social media, and those companies are becoming pretty powerful and potentially corrupt.
That's right. You know, the internet has opened up this Wild West, this freedom where you have free media and journalists going out there and competing with the controlled fake news mainstream media and the corruptions that you are exposing. What do you think about the net neutrality issue that's coming up where, you know, we have some people saying that it's a good thing to overturn net neutrality, some people saying it's a bad thing. Do you think that could impact, whether it goes either way, the free press that's going on the internet?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I need to form my opinions a little bit better about that. Generally, I'm a First Amendment extremist. I was saying tonight that I can't believe, you know, that half of the millennials, people in college, don't even necessarily believe in a First Amendment. So I think we've got some broader problems on our hands. Yeah. And I don't know. I guess my goal is to shock people into believing. I guess my goal is to shock people into believing what's necessarily important for the First Amendment. And I don't know how we're going to get people to understand how important it is that they can exchange ideas freely. I think maybe the only way to do it is to go out and do more of these investigative videos, because they'll go, well, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't know about it.
Yeah.
But you can't lobby for or against this issue because it's so partisan and so bitterly divided. So you got to find some common ground with 80% of the people here. But it is a huge danger. They tried banning me off Twitter last year. Luckily, I got reinstated. I think there's a little bit of the Streisand effect, where if they ban you and get rid of you, they just make you bigger. This week has been all about that, in my opinion. So all you got to do is keep fighting. And if they block you or ban you or shut you down, you find another way, right? You go to Reddit, or some people go to, I don't know, the internet black market, but you create a new internet. I don't know, but you got to keep going, right?
You got to keep on going and be persistent. Well, I just have one last question for you, because I know you are going to be super busy with interviews tonight. Yeah, tons. They're lining up. So my last question to you is, what was your red pill moment?
Define red pill. And I'm sorry.
What I mean by red pill is the moment that you woke up and kind of popped out of the matrix, the bubble, where, you know, most people in America think everything's perfect, everything's run perfectly. The news, the media's run perfectly, the government. What was your moment of awakening?
Wow. Well, that's an interesting question. I would say when I was in college, I read the New York Times every day, every single day, front to back. And because I love media, I love sociology and I'm fascinated by ideas and information, and I read the New York Times every day, and I got really upset by what I was reading because I was like, that just doesn't seem fair. That just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like it's a reflection of reality. And journalism fundamentally is about informing people and giving people a dose of reality. And we rely upon our common sense to inform our intuition, so that when what you're reading in the New York Times is in contrast to your common sense and your intuition, it sort of makes you go, well, this is a bunch of crap. So I was reading this New York Times, and there are, there's some good journalists at the New York Times, but I read it and I was like, you know what, this is a bunch of crap. I just want to go out and show things for what they really are. That's all it was. And I was young, and I've been doing this now for probably 10 years. And honestly, I will never be out of work because there's a lot of corrupt, bad, fraud, and illegal behavior and hypocritical behavior. We will never be out of work, and we have a great responsibility to many people in this country because there just aren't a lot of people who are willing to do it. So now it's just become this magnanimous force of many undercover journalists, full time around the United States, and we are never going to give up.
Well, thank you so much, James O'Keefe. This has been an amazing presentation and an awesome interview, and I salute you. Yeah, go ahead and plug.
American Pravda, January 16th. Order it on barnesandnobles.com.
I'm so excited. The new product at InfoWarsLife.com in a glass bottle, 2-month servings, filled to the brim, filled to the absolute top, the real red pill. This is a heart and brain pill, a nootropic that doesn't have any stimulants in it. But boy, does it stimulate, because it's beyond that. Quite frankly, I just went off what I saw medical doctors prescribing to their patients, but it wasn't prescription, but they were charging people $100, $200 for the formulae, and I came up with our own formula working with some scientists and developers, non-GMO, made right here in America, 120 capsules, and ladies and gentlemen, you add the pregnenolone to it, which is the precursor to all the hormones that your body has to have to even make the hormones in your glands. It is amazing. Red pill, now available at InfoWarsStore.com, and your purchase funds the operation.